15 real gunslinger tricks they used to draw first-most gunfights in the Wild West were over before the gun was even drawn. No dramatic countdown. No fair duel, just one mistake, and it was over. Men like Wyatt Earp and Wild Bill Hickok didn't survive because they were faster. They survived because they were ready. Before the fight even started, positioning, deception, timing. And here's the part most people get wrong. The best gunfighters weren't trying to be quick. They were making sure the other man was slow. So what were they actually doing differently when it mattered most? Men like Wyatt Earp understood this better than anyone. He famously emphasized calmness over speed. According to accounts, Earp believed that the man who kept his composure, who didn't panic, didn't rush, was the one who walked away alive. Drawing too fast often meant losing control, missing your shot, or worse, exposing yourself too early. So one of the first tricks wasn't physical at all. It was psychological. Many gunfighters would deliberately appear relaxed, even careless. Hands resting casually, posture loose, eyes unfocused. It created a false sense of security. Opponents might underestimate them, hesitate, or misread their intent. And in a moment where milliseconds mattered, hesitation was everything. Then there was positioning. Unlike what you see in movies, experienced gunfighters were extremely aware of their environment. They avoided standing in open spaces whenever possible. Walls, door frames, bar counters. Anything that could provide partial cover or limit an opponent's angle became an advantage. Even the position of the sun mattered. Standing with the sunlight behind you could make it harder for your opponent to see clearly, giving you a subtle but critical edge. Another overlooked detail was hand placement. Some gunfighters kept their hands closer to their weapon, but not obviously so. Instead of hovering over the gun like in films, they might rest a thumb casually near the holster, or keep their arm in a position that reduced movement distance. The goal wasn't to look ready, it was to be ready, without signaling it. And then there's the myth of the holster itself. In reality, many gunfighters didn't rely on the low-slung, tied-down holsters you often see in westerns. Those became popular later. During the actual era, holsters were often higher on the belt, sometimes even tucked in a way that allowed for quicker, more natural access. The idea was efficiency, not style. Men like Wild Bill Hickok took this even further. Hickok was known for his preference to sit facing entrances in saloons. This wasn't paranoia, it was strategy. By controlling his line of sight, he reduced the chances of being surprised. He knew that most threats didn't come with warning. They came from behind, from blind spots, from moments of distraction, which brings us to awareness, perhaps the most important trick of all. Experienced gunfighters constantly scanned their surroundings, not in an obvious, frantic way, but subtly. They noticed who entered a room, who left, who seemed nervous, who was watching too closely. This kind of awareness allowed them to anticipate danger before it escalated, because in many cases, the fight was decided before the draw even happened. And then there's timing. Contrary to popular belief, drawing first didn't always mean winning. In fact, some gunfighters deliberately waited for their opponent to make the first move. Why? Because the moment someone commits to drawing, they reveal their intention. That split second, when the opponent transitions from stillness to motion, can be exploited. It's not about being first, it's about being right. There were also subtle forms of deception. A shift in stance, a glance in another direction, even a brief distraction. These could all create openings in a tense situation. The human brain is constantly processing information. Overload it, confuse it, and you gain an advantage. Even clothing played a role. Loose coats, for example, could conceal movement or hide the exact position of a weapon. Some gunfighters used this to their advantage, masking their readiness until the last possible moment. Others avoided anything that might snag or slow their draw, prioritizing clean, unobstructed motion. And then there's something rarely talked about: practice. Not flashy, theatrical practice, but repetition. Drawing, aiming, firing, over and over again. Building muscle memory so that in a high-stress moment the body could act without hesitation. Because when adrenaline hits, fine motor skills degrade. What you've practiced becomes what you do. But even with all these techniques, there was one reality every gunfighter understood. No trick guaranteed survival, because the Wild West wasn't a controlled environment. It was unpredictable, unforgiving, and often decided by factors no one could control: luck, timing, circumstance. Which is why the most effective gunfighters didn't rely on a single skill. They relied on a combination: psychology, awareness, positioning, and restraint. And the deeper you look into it, more you realize. The fastest draw wasn't always the deadliest. Sometimes it was the smartest one. And this is where the myth fully breaks apart, because when you study real encounters, you start to see a pattern. The men who survived weren't chasing speed. They were controlling outcomes. Take the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. It lasted roughly 30 seconds. That's it. No dramatic circling, no drawn-out tension like the movies show. Just chaos. Fast, loud, and decisive. And in that chaos, positioning, awareness, and timing mattered far more than who could flick their wrist the fastest. Men like Wyatt Earp didn't fan the hammer or fire wildly. In fact, most experienced gunfighters avoided flashy techniques altogether. Fanning might look impressive, but it sacrificed accuracy. And accuracy was everything. One clean, controlled shot was worth more than 5 rushed ones. So here's another real trick they aimed. Not perfectly, not like target practice, but deliberately. Even under pressure, trained shooters focused on center mass, reducing the chance of a miss. It wasn't about style. It was about ending the fight quickly. Then there's distance. Most real gunfights didn't happen across wide, dusty streets. They happened close, sometimes just a few feet apart. In those situations, drawing speed mattered less than readiness. Some gunfighters even kept their weapons partially drawn or rested their hand on the grip during tense moments. Again, not obvious, not theatrical, just prepared. And here's something rarely shown. Many fights didn't start with a draw at all. They started with conversation. Tension would build through words, arguments, threats, challenges. And in those moments, experienced gunfighters were reading everything. Tone of voice, body language, eye movement. A sudden shift, like a glance toward a weapon or a tightening of posture, could signal what was about to happen. And if you could read that signal, you didn't need to be faster. You needed to be earlier. Another overlooked factor was weapon choice and condition. Gunfighters were meticulous about their firearms. Clean, functional, reliable. A jammed or misfired weapon wasn't just inconvenient, it was fatal. Some even preferred specific calibers or modifications that balanced recoil and control, ensuring they could fire accurately under stress. And then there's mindset. Men like Doc Holliday had a reputation not just for skill, but for composure under pressure. Holliday, despite being physically ill for much of his life, was known for staying unnervingly calm in dangerous situations. That calmness wasn't accidental. It was cultivated, because panic kills precision, and precision decides outcomes. There's also evidence that some gunfighters used unpredictability as a tactic. Instead of following expected patterns, they broke them. Moving at unusual times, reacting in ways opponents didn't anticipate. In a world where many expected a formal standoff, unpredictability could disrupt timing and create openings. But here's the most important reality. Avoidance was often the best strategy. Many of the most successful gunfighters weren't constantly fighting. They avoided unnecessary conflict, de-escalated when possible, and only engaged when they believed they had a clear advantage. Survival wasn't about proving toughness. It was about staying alive, which completely flips the Hollywood narrative. Because the real tricks weren't about looking dangerous. They were about thinking ahead, reading situations, and acting with precision when it mattered most. And when you put all of this together, the awareness, the positioning, the psychology, the restraint, you start to see something surprising. Gunfights weren't won in the moment of the draw. They were won in everything that happened before it. If this changed how you see the Wild West, then you've just stepped beyond the myth and into the reality, because history isn't built on legends, it's built on what actually happened beneath them. So if you want more real stories, real tactics, and the hidden truths behind the world's most iconic moments, make sure you subscribe and stay with us. Because the deeper you go, the more you realize the truth is rarely what you were told, and sometimes it's far more dangerous.